The Thompson family was the picture of suburban bliss. Emily and Robert had been married for over a decade, sharing a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood with their teenage daughter, Sophia. Life was stable and predictable, with Robert working long hours at his firm, while Emily managed the household with precision. Emily was the kind of woman who turned heads effortlessly. In her late 30s, she retained a youthful beauty that belied her age. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves, framing her delicate features, and her vibrant green eyes had a way of drawing people in. Robert often teased her, calling her the reason for neighborhood traffic, but Emily always laughed it off, reminding him that he was her one and only. Sophia, their 16-year-old daughter, was equally striking, a blend of her parents' best features. While her relationship with her mother was close, she idolized her father, often confiding in him about her hopes and dreams. Despite the teenage mood swings and occasional rebellion, Sophia had a keen sense of observation, a quality she kept to herself. Robert's dedication to his career meant he was often away from home, leaving Emily with long, quiet days. While she loved being a homemaker, a sense of restlessness had begun to creep into her life. She often found herself reminiscing about her younger years when life was unpredictable and exciting. One summer, Robert announced that his firm had taken on an intern, a young man named Jason. "He's bright, ambitious, and eager to learn," Robert shared over dinner one evening. "He's helping with some research for a big case, and I think he's going to make a great lawyer someday." Emily smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She had no reason to imagine that Jason would play any role in her life. Yet, a week later, when Robert mentioned that Jason would be stopping by their home to drop off some documents, Emily couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. Jason arrived on a sunny afternoon, dressed casually in a polo shirt and jeans. At just 22, he exuded youthful confidence and charm. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his athletic build hinted at hours spent on the basketball court. When Emily answered the door, she was struck by how polite and well-spoken he was. "Mrs. Thompson," Jason greeted her with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Thompson speaks very highly of you." Emily found herself blushing slightly at the compliment. "Please, call me Emily," she said, gesturing for him to come inside. As Jason handed over the documents, their fingers brushed, a fleeting contact that sent an unexpected jolt through Emily. She shook it off as her imagination, but something about Jason's easy smile and relaxed demeanor intrigued her. Sophia, who had been sitting in the living room, observed the interaction with quiet curiosity. She noticed the way her mother's laughter seemed a touch more vibrant and the slight flush in her cheeks as she spoke to Jason. Sophia's keen instincts told her that something about this moment was different. "Nice to meet you, Jason," Sophia said, breaking the moment. She gave him a polite nod before retreating to her room, her mind already racing with questions. The days passed uneventfully after Jason's visit, but Emily found her thoughts drifting to the young intern more often than she cared to admit. She would recall the way his boyish smile lit up his face and the effortless charm he carried. She chalked it up to harmless daydreaming, nothing more. But fate seemed to conspire against her when Robert mentioned Jason again during dinner. "Jason's been doing an incredible job. He's driven and asks all the right questions. I think he'll have a great future ahead of him." Emily smiled, nodding in agreement, but her mind wandered. She remembered the way Jason had looked at her, his dark eyes lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. It had been flattering, nothing inappropriate, but enough to awaken something dormant inside her. A few weeks later, Robert invited Jason over for dinner to celebrate the success of a major case. "It's the least we can do to thank him," Robert explained. When the evening arrived, Emily spent extra time preparing. She convinced herself it was to ensure the evening went smoothly for Robert, but a part of her relished the idea of seeing Jason again. She chose a simple yet flattering dress, one that hugged her curves in all the right places without appearing too obvious. Jason arrived promptly, his easygoing charm putting everyone at ease. Over dinner, he regaled the Thompsons with stories of his college days and his aspirations to make a difference in the legal world. Robert beamed with pride, clearly impressed by the young man he was mentoring. Emily found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. Jason had a way of making everyone feel like they were the center of his attention, and when his eyes met hers across the table, she felt a warmth rise in her cheeks. Sophia, ever observant, noticed the subtle shifts in her mother's demeanor. The way Emily leaned slightly closer when Jason spoke, the way her laugh seemed just a bit more genuine. Sophia filed these observations away, unsure what to make of them but unable to ignore the growing tension. After dinner, as Robert and Jason discussed work in the living room, Emily brought out dessert. As she placed the plates on the coffee table, Jason looked up at her and smiled. "You've outdone yourself, Emily. This is amazing." "Thank you, Jason," Emily replied, her voice soft. She caught his gaze for a moment longer than intended before quickly turning away. Her heart raced, but she dismissed the feeling as harmless flattery. When the evening wound down, Jason stood to leave, shaking Robert's hand firmly. "Thank you so much for dinner. It was a pleasure." As Jason turned to Emily, his expression softened. "And thank you, Emily. It's been a wonderful evening." Emily returned his smile, feeling a small thrill at the way he said her name. "You're welcome, Jason. I hope we'll see you again soon." As the door closed behind him, Emily felt a pang of regret that the evening was over. She reminded herself that it was nothing, just the fleeting excitement of meeting someone new. But deep down, she couldn't deny the stirrings of temptation. Sophia, watching from the stairs, noted the wistful look in her mother's eyes. Something wasn't right, and she intended to find out what. Emily's days returned to their usual rhythm, yet Jason's presence lingered in her mind. She found herself glancing at her phone more often, half hoping for a message that would never come. Her guilt grew with each passing day, but she told herself that a little harmless admiration was nothing to worry about. Jason, however, seemed to have a knack for appearing at the most unexpected times. One afternoon, as Emily was running errands, she stopped by a coffee shop near her home. To her surprise, Jason was there, seated by the window with his laptop open and a cup of coffee beside him. "Emily?" Jason's face lit up as he recognized her. "Jason, what are the odds?" she replied, her smile more genuine than she intended. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Care to join me? I could use a break." For a moment, she hesitated, but the warmth in his smile melted her reservations. "Sure, why not?" They fell into an easy conversation. Jason spoke about his dreams of making partner at a prestigious law firm someday, while Emily shared stories about her life before marriage, her love for painting, the travels she'd once dreamed of taking. He listened intently, his attention making her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. "You're incredibly talented," Jason said, leaning forward. "Why did you stop painting?" Emily hesitated. "Life happened. Responsibilities. Family. You know how it goes." Jason shook his head. "That's a shame. You shouldn't let go of something that makes you happy." His sincerity struck a chord. Emily couldn't remember the last time anyone had encouraged her like this. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. They talked until her phone buzzed with a text from Robert, reminding her that Sophia would need to be picked up soon. Emily stood, reluctantly gathering her things. "I should go. It was nice seeing you, Jason." "The pleasure was all mine," he replied, standing as she did. "Maybe next time we can make it more intentional." Emily laughed nervously, brushing off his comment as playful banter. But as she drove home, her thoughts returned to his words and the way they lingered between them. Sophia had noticed her mother's recent shifts, small things like checking her appearance in the mirror more often or humming absent-mindedly around the house. The changes were subtle, but Sophia's sharp instincts told her something was out of the ordinary. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Sophia stumbled across Jason's profile. Curiosity piqued, she clicked on his posts, her eyes narrowing as she noticed a familiar setting in the background of one photo, a coffee shop her mother often visited. The caption read, "Great company makes the grind worthwhile." Sophia's stomach turned. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her gut told her there was more to this story. She resolved to pay closer attention, silently vowing to uncover the truth. The days following her unexpected coffee shop encounter with Jason were a blur for Emily. She often replayed their conversation, the way his words made her feel seen and valued. It was intoxicating, and despite her efforts to suppress it, The allure of his attention lingered. A week later, Jason texted her. The message was casual, polite even, but it sent her heart racing. Jason, hi, Emily. I hope this isn't too forward, but I'd love your advice on something. I'm working on a project and thought your perspective might help. Can I send it to you? Emily stared at the message, conflicted. She told herself it was harmless, just a professional request. Before she could second-guess herself, she replied, Emily, of course. Send it over, and I'll take a look. When his email arrived, she realized it was a draft for a proposal he was working on at Robert's firm. Emily found herself drawn into the details, her mind preoccupied with ways to help him improve. She replied with thoughtful suggestions, and soon their exchanges became more frequent. Jason used every opportunity to build their connection. He would sprinkle compliments into their conversations, subtle enough to seem innocent, yet deliberate enough to leave an impact. Emily, you're amazing at this, he wrote in one email. I don't know how Robert got so lucky. She brushed off the comment at first, but with each interaction, the line between professionalism and flirtation blurred further. It wasn't long before Jason asked to meet in person again. Jason, would you mind going over my changes in person? I'd really value your insight. Emily hesitated, but the flattery was difficult to resist. They met at a quiet cafe, tucked away from prying eyes. The atmosphere was relaxed, yet Emily couldn't shake the flutter of nerves in her chest. Jason was charming as always, and their conversation quickly drifted from his project to more personal topics. You know, Emily, Jason began, his tone more serious, you have this energy about you. It's magnetic. People must tell you that all the time. Emily felt a blush creep up her neck. Not really, she admitted. Most of the time, I'm just Robert's wife or Sophia's mom. Jason leaned forward, his dark eyes holding hers. That's a shame, because you're so much more than that. Her breath hitched. For a moment, the air between them felt electric, the unspoken tension thickening. Emily quickly glanced away, trying to regain her composure. We should get back to your project, she said, forcing a laugh. Of course, Jason replied, his smile hinting at something deeper. Sophia's suspicions continued to grow. Her mother had become more secretive, her phone glued to her hand, her demeanor shifting whenever she thought no one was watching. Sophia began keeping closer tabs on Emily, noting her comings and goings with precision. One afternoon, as Emily prepared to leave the house, Sophia asked, Where are you going? Emily hesitated. Just running errands. Sophia nodded, but decided to follow her discreetly. She kept her distance, her instincts guiding her as she tailed Emily's car. When Emily pulled into the parking lot of a cafe, Sophia parked nearby and watched as her mother walked inside. A few minutes later, a familiar figure entered the cafe, Jason. Sophia's heart sank as she saw the two of them sit together, their body language far more comfortable than she'd expected. She watched as they leaned in close, laughing and sharing what looked like an intimate conversation. Sophia didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, betrayal? But one thing was clear. She needed to get to the bottom of this. Emily's connection with Jason deepened with each meeting. Their conversations, initially about work, grew more personal. They shared stories, laughed at private jokes, and began to confide in one another. Jason's presence became an intoxicating escape from the routines of Emily's life. She knew she was treading dangerous ground, but convinced herself that it was all harmless. One afternoon, Jason texted her. Jason, I'm at the park near your neighborhood. It's beautiful out today. Care to join me for a walk? Emily stared at her phone, her heart racing. She knew she should decline, but the allure of Jason's invitation was too strong to resist. After a brief hesitation, she replied, Emily, I'll be there in 15. When she arrived, Jason was waiting near a secluded path, dressed casually in a t-shirt and jeans. His smile lit up his face when he saw her, and Emily felt a surge of warmth. Hi, she said, her voice soft. Hi, Jason replied, his tone matching hers. Thanks for coming. They strolled through the park, the conversation flowing easily. Jason listened intently as Emily spoke about her dreams of traveling the world, encouraging her to pursue the passions she had long set aside. You deserve to chase what makes you happy, Emily, Jason said, his gaze locking with hers. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. His words struck a chord, and Emily felt a lump form in her throat. You make it sound so easy. Maybe it is, he said, his voice quiet. Sometimes, you just have to take the leap. They stopped by a bench shaded by trees, and Jason gestured for her to sit. Emily hesitated, but finally relented. As they sat together, the tension between them grew palpable. You're incredible, you know that? Jason said, his voice low. Robert's a lucky man. Emily's breath caught. She looked away, her mind racing. Jason, we shouldn't. But before she could finish, Jason leaned in. His lips brushed against hers, tentative at first, then more insistent. Emily froze, her heart pounding as a wave of guilt and exhilaration washed over her. She pulled back, her voice trembling. This isn't right. Jason searched her eyes, his expression earnest. I can't help how I feel, Emily. You're amazing. I've never met anyone like you. Emily's resolve wavered as she felt the pull of his words. Against her better judgment, she leaned in, her lips finding his again. This time, she didn't pull away. Sophia, meanwhile, grew increasingly certain that something was amiss. She had noticed her mother's frequent absences and the way her demeanor shifted whenever her phone buzzed with a message. Determined to uncover the truth, Sophia began monitoring Emily's behavior more closely. One evening, as Emily prepared for a quick run to the store, Sophia decided to follow her again. She stayed far enough behind to remain unnoticed, her instincts sharp as she tracked her mother's car. When Emily parked in a lot near a park, Sophia's suspicion deepened. She waited in her car, watching as her mother emerged and greeted Jason near the entrance to the trail. Sophia's stomach churned as she saw them walking together, their conversation animated and their body language far too intimate for comfort. Sophia clenched her fists as she watched Jason lean in to kiss her mother. Her heart raced with a mix of anger and heartbreak as she snapped a few photos with her phone. She didn't know what she'd do with them yet, but Emily left the park that day with a storm of emotions raging inside her. She felt the heat of Jason's kiss linger on her lips, and the weight of guilt bore down on her chest. The thrill of their connection was undeniable, but she knew she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Jason texted her later that evening. Jason, I can't stop thinking about today. You're incredible, Emily. Emily stared at the message for a long time. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, desire, guilt, and confusion. She didn't reply. Sophia, armed with the photos she had taken, felt a gnawing pit of anger and uncertainty in her stomach. She had never imagined her mother could betray their family like this, and the realization left her feeling adrift. She debated whether to confront Emily directly or tell Robert. Unsure of the best course, she decided to gather more evidence before taking any action. The following weekend, Robert announced he would be traveling for a work conference. Emily tried to mask her nerves, but the news sent a ripple of anticipation through her. She knew what the weekend could mean if Jason reached out again. And he did. Jason, I miss you. Can I see you this weekend? Emily hesitated, but her resolve crumbled under the weight of her longing. Emily, tomorrow morning. My place. Jason arrived at the Thompson home the next day, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Emily greeted him at the door, her heart pounding as she let him inside. The house felt strangely empty without Robert and Sophia, amplifying the intimacy of the moment. Jason stood in the entryway, his gaze locking onto Emily's. I've been thinking about you all week, he said, stepping closer. Emily's breath hitched as Jason reached for her, his hands brushing her waist. She let herself get lost in the moment, their lips meeting in a heated kiss. Jason's touch was both gentle and hungry, his fingers tracing the curve of her back. As their passion deepened, Emily led him to the living room, her mind too clouded with desire to consider the consequences. Jason pulled her onto the couch, his hands exploring her body as their kisses grew more urgent. Emily felt her reservations slip away as they gave in to the magnetic pull between them. Are you sure? Jason whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, Emily replied, her voice trembling. I want this. Unbeknownst to them, Sophia had grown suspicious when she noticed Jason's car parked a few houses down. She had decided to stay home that day under the pretense of studying, her instincts telling her there was more to discover. Quietly, she slipped downstairs, her heart pounding as she approached the living room. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. Her mother and Jason were locked in a passionate embrace, oblivious to the world around them. Sophia felt her stomach churn, a mix of anger and disbelief coursing through her veins. Unable to watch any longer, she retreated to her room, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know how to confront her mother, but she knew she couldn't stay silent. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sophia. She couldn't unsee what she had witnessed, and the weight of her discovery bore heavily on her. Her once close relationship with her mother now felt tainted by betrayal, and she found it difficult to be in the same room with Emily. Emily, oblivious to her daughter's knowledge, went about her days with a sense of renewed energy. The brief affair with Jason had reignited a part of her she thought had been lost, but the underlying guilt was never far behind. She convinced herself that what had happened was a one-time mistake, something she could bury and move on from. Jason, however, had other plans. He texted Emily often, his messages alternating between flirtation and longing. "Jason, I can't stop thinking about you. I don't regret anything. Do you?" Emily wrestled with her feelings, but ultimately gave in to her desire for him. "Emily, I don't know what this is, but it's complicated. We need to be careful." Jason agreed, but his eagerness to see her again was evident. Their stolen moments became more frequent: coffee dates, brief meetings in secluded places, and late-night text exchanges. Emily knew she was playing with fire, but the excitement was too intoxicating to resist. Sophia, meanwhile, began keeping meticulous records of her mother's interactions. She noted the times Emily would leave the house without explanation, the sudden uptick in her text messages, and her subtle changes in behavior. Sophia felt a growing sense of responsibility to protect her father, even as it broke her heart to uncover more evidence. One evening, Sophia overheard her mother on the phone, her voice soft and warm in a way that was unmistakably intimate. "Jason, I can't talk right now," Emily whispered, a nervous laugh escaping her. "I'll call you later." Sophia clenched her fists, anger surging through her. She debated confronting Emily but decided against it. Instead, she began compiling everything she had: photos, timestamps, and now even snippets of overheard conversations. She didn't know how she would use it, but she was determined to make her mother face the consequences. The tension in the house grew palpable as Sophia's demeanor toward Emily became colder. Emily noticed the change but attributed it to typical teenage mood swings. She tried to bridge the gap by asking Sophia about school and friends, but Sophia's responses were curt and distant. One evening, as Robert sat in his study reviewing documents, Emily joined him, a glass of wine in hand. "You've been working so hard lately," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You should take a break." Robert smiled, though his eyes remained on his work. "I'll rest when this case is over. Besides, I'm lucky to have you keeping everything running smoothly here." Emily felt a pang of guilt at his words, but she masked it with a smile. "You're too kind." From the hallway, Sophia watched the exchange, her heart aching for her father. She couldn't fathom how her mother could betray someone as devoted as Robert. It solidified her resolve. She couldn't stay silent forever. Sophia spent the following days grappling with the weight of her secret. The evidence she had gathered felt damning, yet confronting her mother, or worse, revealing the truth to her father, seemed like an impossible task. She loved her family, and the thought of tearing it apart terrified her. But the betrayal gnawed at her, leaving her no room for peace. One afternoon, while Sophia was studying in her room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Lily. "Lily, hey, are you okay? You've seemed distracted lately." Sophia stared at the screen, debating whether to confide in someone. Finally, she replied, "Sophia, can you keep a secret? Like, a huge secret?" "Lily, of course. You can tell me anything." Sophia hesitated before sending her next message. "Sophia, I think my mom is cheating on my dad." There was a long pause before Lily replied. "Lily, Wait, what? Are you sure? Sophia, I've seen things. Like, her with another guy. It's not just a guess. Lily's response was immediate. Lily, oh my God, Sophia. That's serious. What are you going to do? Sophia, I don't know. I feel like I'm betraying my dad by not saying anything, but if I tell him, it'll destroy everything. Lily, you can't keep this bottled up. Maybe talk to your mom first? Give her a chance to explain? Sophia considered Lily's suggestion, but the idea of confronting her mother filled her with dread. Still, she knew she couldn't stay silent forever. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Emily was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Sophia walked in. Her mother greeted her with a warm smile, but Sophia's expression was guarded. Hey, sweetie, Emily said, stirring a pot on the stove. How was your day? Sophia hesitated, her hands fidgeting. It was fine, she replied, her tone flat. Emily glanced at her, sensing the tension. Is everything okay? You've been quiet lately. Sophia felt a surge of anger rise within her. I don't know, Mom. Is everything okay with you? Emily froze, her hand pausing mid-stir. She turned to face Sophia, her expression puzzled. What do you mean? Sophia crossed her arms, her voice trembling. I mean, you've been acting different. Sneaking out, always on your phone. And then there's Jason. Emily's heart stopped. Jason? She repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, Jason, Sophia said, her eyes narrowing. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. I've seen you with him. Emily's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. How could you do this to Dad? Sophia demanded, her voice breaking. How could you do this to us? Emily stepped toward her daughter, her hands raised in a calming gesture. Sophia, please, let me explain. Explain what? Sophia snapped. That you've been sneaking around with some guy half your age? That you're lying to Dad every day? Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she reached for Sophia, but her daughter stepped back. Sophia, it's not as simple as you think. Then make me understand, Sophia said, her voice shaking. Because right now, all I see is you destroying our family. Emily felt a wave of shame and despair crash over her. She knew this moment would come, but nothing could have prepared her for the pain in her daughter's eyes. Sophia stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Emily alone with her guilt. That night, as Emily lay awake in bed, she realized that the fragile balance she had maintained was beginning to crumble. She couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Emily woke the next morning with a heavy heart. The confrontation with Sophia had shattered the fragile illusion she had built around her affair. The guilt that had lingered in the background now consumed her thoughts, and she knew she needed to act before the damage became irreparable. Sophia avoided her mother entirely, retreating to her room and barely speaking during meals. Robert noticed the tension but attributed it to typical teenage moods. Emily, however, could feel the weight of Sophia's silent judgment every time their paths crossed. Jason continued to text her, unaware of the growing storm at home. Jason, I miss you. When can I see you again? Emily stared at his message, her emotions in turmoil. She wanted to respond, but every time she thought of Sophia's face, angry and betrayed, she hesitated. Finally, she typed a reply. Emily, I need some space, Jason. Things are complicated right now. Jason's response was swift. Jason, is everything okay? Did something happen? Emily, it's just a lot. Please understand. Jason didn't press further, but Emily could sense his disappointment. She put her phone away, determined to focus on her family. Sophia, meanwhile, struggled with what to do next. Her confrontation with her mother had left her shaken, but she still felt a responsibility to her father. She debated whether to tell him directly or wait to see if her mother would come clean. During a quiet evening at home, Robert sat in his study, reviewing a case file. Sophia knocked on the door hesitantly. Come in, Robert called, looking up with a warm smile when he saw his daughter. What's up, kiddo? Sophia stepped inside, her heart pounding. Can I talk to you about something? Of course, Robert said, setting his papers aside. What's on your mind? Sophia hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She loved her father deeply and didn't want to hurt him, but the weight of her secret was unbearable. "It's about Mom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert's expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What about her?" Sophia took a deep breath, her hands trembling. I think she's hiding something from you." Robert's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Sophia hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She opened the photos she had taken at the park and handed the device to her father. Robert's eyes widened as he studied the images of Emily with Jason, their closeness undeniable. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know how to tell you. I saw them together, and I think she's having an affair." Robert's face hardened as he set the phone down. He sat back in his chair, his jaw clenched, his mind racing. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Sophia nodded, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to believe it, but I saw them. She's been lying to you." Robert stood abruptly, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut, the evidence leaving no room for denial. He turned to Sophia, his voice firm but gentle. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I need some time to process this." Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face as she left the room. Robert sat in silence, the weight of the revelation sinking in. That night, as Emily prepared for bed, she noticed Robert's unusual silence. He barely acknowledged her, his demeanor distant and cold. Emily's stomach churned with anxiety, knowing something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" she asked tentatively. Robert turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." Emily's heart sank. The air in the bedroom was thick with tension as Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Robert stood across from her, his arms crossed, his jaw set in a grim line. "What's going on?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Robert held up Sophia's phone, the photos glaring back at her. "Do you want to explain this?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the images, her mind racing for an explanation, but there was no denying what they revealed. Her carefully constructed world was unraveling before her eyes. I can explain," she stammered, tears welling up. Robert's voice was low, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. "Then start explaining." Emily's shoulders sagged as the weight of her guilt bore down on her. "It wasn't supposed to happen, Robert. I never meant for it to go this far." "You never meant for it to go this far?" Robert repeated, his tone incredulous. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" Emily's tears spilled over as she tried to find the words. "I've been feeling lost, disconnected. You're always working and she choked on her words, unable to continue. "So this is my fault?" Robert demanded, his voice rising. "Because I work hard to provide for us, you decided to betray me with some kid?" "It's not like that," Emily pleaded. "Jason made me feel seen, appreciated. I didn't realize how lonely I was until you decided to destroy our marriage." Robert interrupted, his voice cold. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation hanging heavily between them. Emily buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled. Sophia sat in her room, her heart pounding as muffled voices filtered through the walls. She could hear her father's anger, her mother's desperate attempts to explain. Tears streamed down her face as she listened, guilt and sorrow twisting her insides. Robert's voice softened, but his words cut just as deeply. "I can't believe you would risk everything for this. What about Sophia? Did you even think about her?" Emily looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Of course I thought about her. I thought about all of you. I hate myself for what I've done, Robert. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. I love our family." Robert shook his head, his expression a mix of anger and pain. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like this, Emily. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Emily reached for him, but he stepped back. "Please, Robert, let me make this right. I'll do whatever it takes." "I need time," he said, his voice weary. "And you need to figure out who you are and what you want. But right now, I need to think about Sophia." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emily alone with her guilt and regret. The next morning, Robert sat Sophia down in the living room. He took her hands in his expression somber but resolute. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said softly. "I know it wasn't easy." Sophia nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. I couldn't let her keep lying." "You did the right thing," Robert assured her. "No matter what happens, we'll get through this together." Over the following weeks, the Thompson household remained tense. Emily sought counseling and worked to repair the damage she had caused, but the road to redemption was steep. Robert focused on rebuilding his relationship with Sophia, ensuring she felt secure despite the turmoil. Jason, realizing the consequences of his actions, quietly left his internship, cutting ties with the family completely. His departure was a small relief for Emily, but it did little to ease her guilt. For Sophia, the scars of her discovery lingered, but she found solace in her father's unwavering love and support. The family was fractured, but there was hope for healing, one step at a time. As time passed, the Thompson family began to rebuild, though the memory of Emily's betrayal remained a sobering reminder of the fragility of trust. The journey was far from over, but they faced it together, determined to find a way forward.